Have you ever felt like you were trying so hard to fit in that somewhere along the way, you started losing parts of yourself? Hey everyone, this is Evelyn, and thank you for listening to Reppin. Today, I'm talking with acclaimed filmmaker, Eugene Yi. Eugene is the director of powerful documentaries like The Rose, Come Back to Me, and Free Chol Li. And his latest film that's on HBO is called The A-List, 15 Stories from Asian and Pacific Diasporas. The documentary features incredible talents like Sandra Oh, Bowen Yang, Connie Chung, and Kumail Nanjiani. The A-List explores identity, belonging, and the pressure so many of us feel to become who we think the world wants us to be. Eugene opens up so honestly about authenticity, healing, and what it actually takes to feel comfortable in your own skin. So if you've ever struggled with fitting in, self-worth, or wondering if who you are is enough, I really think you're going to see yourself in this one. So grab your coffee and listen in on my conversation with Eugene Yi.
Part of my experience of growing up was very much looking in the mirror, walking down the street, catching myself in a window and thinking, oh, I am not that default. I'm something else. And just that sense of disconnection, I feel like lies at the root of a lot of what I felt growing up.
Rough and rugged, represent NY, hold it down for my peeps. New York, New York. We rep the hardest, hardcore. Nobody harder. Let them know that's the way we rock it. Tell me what you got.
Eugene, thank you so much for coming back. How are you? It's so good to see you.
Good. How are you?
I am seriously stupid excited to talk to you about this film. I have loved working with you since Come Back to Me, the Rose documentary, and I'm so excited about this film, The A-List. Can you just tell people what I emailed you after I saw this film?
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me pull it up. Wow, it's been about a year since The Rose, because that was at Tribeca last year.
Yeah. So we've worked together before and you're coming back. So thank you for that.
No, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me personally. It really is such a privilege to be here with you on your platform and to be in community with you. I just truly appreciate everything you do. And thank you for having so many members of our team from The Rose come back to me
Oh my God.
on your pod. I heard things that I'd never heard before from them. It was just a real treat for me personally, just being a fly on the wall in those conversations and listening in.
We're going to get into it. But did you find that email yet?
I did.
What did I say after I saw the screening?
All right. You said, just watch the screener, ... Holy period, shit period, all cap. This is so good, period, still all cap. And this is so important, period.
It's so true.
I want to know why you feel that way, because, I've been living with this obviously, but I'm so curious about.
That's why you're back. That's why we're talking about this. First of all, congratulations on the film. I meant what I said when I emailed you and saw the screener. But before we start, give listeners an idea of what the premise of The A-List is and the genesis of this documentary.
The A-List, 15 Stories from Asian and Pacific Diasporas, profiles 15 API folks from different parts of our community. Some of them are pretty high profile, your Sandra Ohs and your Bowen Yang and your Kumail Nanjiani. But most of them are not. But for us, they are just as important and just as vital in terms of trying to tell the story of our community. Because the film is, it's an easy thing to say would be that the film is a group portrait of our communities. But I think I come to prefer to think of it as an attempt at a portrait. Because really, if we're talking about API folk, we're talking about people with roots in, basically half to 2/3 of the world. And the fact that we are here as diaspora communities is why we're all under this umbrella. And so this umbrella term of Asian American API, we wanted to investigate, interrogate, question that term through these 15 stories and allow people to come away with a sense of what they feel like is important and what they feel like connects all of us in terms of what we have in common. By way of broader introduction, the film is part of a series of list films that started about 20 years ago with the first film called The Blacklist, which focused on the African American community and has gone from there. The inception was, and I'll tell the story because he's not here, it started with the series creator, Timothy Greenfield Sanders. So he's a portrait photographer who specializes in these really beautiful and interesting portraits of folks that he often uses essentially a 100-year-old camera that's about the size of a wall to take these portraits. So if you see any of the materials related to the film, those portraits are taken with essentially that camera.
You must have just needed extra PAs to try to load that in.
He's really quite resourceful. Like he has a person who helps them. But yeah, those are the portraits. And the idea, the way he tells it, he was sitting with Toni Morrison because he's friends with Toni Morrison.
As one is.
As one would be if one is part of New York City royalty. And Toni Morrison suggested a series of films about Black divas. So this kind of grew out of that, a series of profiles of African-American folks of varying levels of prominence that would be like Timothy's portraits come to life. The idea is really very structured. It's just, you're literally just like there listening to this person's story in a talking head interview for like 3 to 5 minutes. And you have one, and then it goes on to the next one.
Yeah.
And from then, they've made a series of films about the Black community, about the Latino, Latinx, Latinx community, queer communities, trans communities, boomers, women, and now here we are with the A-list.
Yeah, it's an incredible film. And I want to say first and foremost, thank you for making it. And I'm so excited that it's going to be aired on HBO. And let me just say this, the reason why I sent you that email after I saw the screening is, first of all, it's a who's who in the AAPI community. I mean, you also have Connie Chung, who's a legend, and she was the only person, literally the only person that I saw growing up as an Asian woman, or Asian, period, and then woman. The reason why I said what I said to you, and I meant every word, holy shit, all in caps, this is so important, because there were so many moments throughout the various stories, through your incredible, like, badass roster of guests that were so personable. Like, they were not the legends that they were. They were like people in my community. I was able to see them not as like Connie Chung, cue the music. It was like Connie Chung, the person that went through these experiences. The same thing with Sandra Oh. Obviously she's an incredible talent and everyone loves her for all the right reasons. But I was able to see Sandra, Connie, Kumail, all of these incredible trailblazers as regular people. So that was the first thing. And then throughout the screening, I can't tell you, Eugene, how many times that I was like, oh my God, me too. They didn't have the language to some of it until like those specific moments. It made me think about things that I hadn't thought about in a long, long time, growing up, and it brought back memories and it also brought back scars. It made me laugh. And just all in all, I think the culmination of all of these things, being able to see these incredible icons and trailblazers as people, that's the first thing. Second thing, people in my community. 3, being able to help me get a better handle on my own personal experience. And 4, I kind of sit back, and you and I have talked about this when you guested on the show the first time on Come Back to Me, the documentary about the Rose, is I would have never had the opportunity to see a film like this when I was growing up. And now seeing this film and all of these people, it made me feel like I found a community, that I had a bunch of people, you included, obviously, that innately understand and knows what it feels like to deal with some of these issues. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And that's why I emailed you when I saw this documentary and why it's so important.
No, I mean, that means so much to hear from you. And thank you for all the work you do too, as well, because I think this is why we do what we do, right? So that the next generation, my kid, whoever's young and coming up, doesn't have to feel unseen the way that you and I feel like we did, and that many others feel like they did when they were coming up. So thank you.
In our first conversation, when you first came on the show to talk about Come Back to Me, a documentary about a Korean rock band called The Rose, and there were so many things that you said that literally stayed with me. And you might not even remember saying this on my show, but I'll paraphrase. You said you don't like catching yourself in the mirror because that baggage and those scars are still inside of you. And you wish you could get rid of it, but it is very much a part of who you are. Can you sort of explain and set up what you meant by that for people who might not understand or have the same experiences that we do?
Wow. How much baggage do we want to unpack? My goodness.
Well, just take the accessory pouch out first for now.
Okay. We'll take the poetry bag out.
Yeah.
I think if you grow up here, you grow up to think of a certain kind of person to be the default. If you think a person, there's like an image that comes from it. And part of my experience of growing up was very much looking in the mirror, walking down the street, catching myself in a window and thinking, oh, I am not that default. I am something else. And just that sense of disconnection, I feel like lies at the root of a lot of what I felt growing up. And I grew up in a fairly diverse place. I grew up in Los Angeles. Like, I was surrounded by people from all over the world. But back then in the 80s and late 70s, there were just the signal that I would get and absorb from the culture around me were very much that, like, the default person does not look like me. And so I'm racialized, I'm otherized, I'm something else. And working through that, honestly, has just been part of the project of being alive, whether through my work or just by existing. And so I'm glad that whatever part of that is reflected in the work that I've been just privileged enough to do is resonating with you, because I feel like from conversations I've had with you and with so many others, like, this is not an uncommon experience. You know, Tammy Duckworth mentions that she's one of the interviewees in the film, and she talks about how when she was coming up, the image of the perfect soldier was not someone who looked like her. It was someone who was a white man. And yet that didn't stop her, because her dream was to be a helicopter pilot. Her dream was to be in the army, and that's what she went after, and that's what she faced and fought against, just by existing in those spaces and all the expectations that might come by looking like her and being in those spaces.
Let me kind of ask you this. Like, you talked about the disconnect because the default wasn't people that looked like us. Can I ask you how it made you feel?
I mean, bad. I think, to put it simply, just confused. I mean, and I say this as like, you know, a straight guy too. So, like, there are obviously all kinds of signals in terms of gender and queerness that, like, I was not attuned to. So, but just by virtue of being racialized, it just made me wonder why I should feel that way. But I think what fueled in me also was a lifelong search for community and connection, and trying to find ways that it could work for just me as an individual on my own terms. Because, you know, I'm of Korean descent, and that means that I grew up with some church in my background, as many Koreans do.
Okay.
And I'm an atheist now, but what I appreciate about those spaces back then, obviously, was that there was community there, and there is really something that's just so important about having those spaces where you're not parsing that particular question, like, of just being an other, where you are surrounded by people who look like you, who share your background, with whom you connect in that way. But at the same time, like, I think the fact that you have to create those spaces just underscores the fact that you are an other. So if anything, it's like you're kind of having both experiences at the same time. And there is a relationship between this and, if I can just get like college nerdy for a second, like double consciousness, like W.B. Du Bois's ideas about just sort of like these different aspects and lenses and views of ourselves that we have as people who are not white in the US. I think because of that, and we're only on like the toiletry bag here still, obviously. But because of that, what I've always thought is to just sort of find that sense of connection, that sense of, to borrow another nerdy college thing, like the writer Viet Thanh Nguyen, who wrote the book The Sympathizer, like well-known Pulitzer Prize-winning Vietnamese American writer and scholar, talked about this notion of narrative plenitude. Like narrative plenitude being basically us having enough stories, so no one story and no one person has to represent everything.
Right.
And just how freeing it can be just to be yourself.
Yeah.
To that end, like the more work of yours that's out there, the more I can do, the more all of us can do, just not even by being necessarily storytellers, but like just by existing, because we are all, if nothing, we're made of stories. We are stories. This is how we create meaning in this world. The more we do that, the closer we might get to some idea of narrative plenitude, where hopefully someone like my daughter can just kind of grow up and not really think too hard about this stuff.
Yeah.
And she can have other baggage. It'll be great. She'll have weird baggage that I can't even imagine.
There's plenty of baggage to go around of all kinds. And I'm sure everyone's going to have a Costco-sized selection of baggage that they're going to have.
Yeah. With the palette. You're not talking about the cart. We're talking the palette. You're putting on like 20 cases of water. You know,
like hoarding.
We got like 8 bags of rice, 20-pound bags of rice. Like
8? What are you, skimping?
But we're getting the long grain, we're getting the basmati, we're getting the short grain, because we're all about culture, or we're all about recognizing the diversity in our community.
Yes, we need rice of all kinds. We started this conversation a little bit on your first appearance, where you were talking about, having this baggage, and I certainly share that. A lot of the films that you do, certainly with this one as well, has to deal with confidence, identity, feeling like an outsider consistently. And I'll go as far as saying this, we're kind of in the same age bracket. I'm a little older than you, I believe. But I grew up, watching legendary films like Breakfast and Tiffany's, where respectfully, the legend Mickey Rooney played, an Asian character. And Mickey Rooney is a short, older, white man. And he wore Coke glasses and buck teeth, and it really made me cringe. But images like that were kind of the only images I saw growing up. So I did grow up thinking I was the awkward outcast. I wasn't even the best friend. That's only been recent, I think, in terms of the Asian portrayal. I think I was so starved for any kind of stories that I could latch onto, but I didn't have it. So that's what I'm saying. Like you and storytellers and creators like you are so vitally important, because hopefully your kids can have different baggage and not feel like they don't have a community. So let me ask you this. Going back, one of the things that blew my mind about this documentary is that you were able to get these incredible people on the documentary, and that I was able to see them beyond what they were known for. These guys are so well known in their lane, and I was able to see them, and they were so real and so personal, and they were so human. So what did you say to them, and what was their reaction in getting them on?
Especially for the people who are more high profile. I feel like, if we're being real, they probably get a lot of these kinds of asks. And so every single one of those higher profile people, in my mind, was a huge get, because they could have said no. And a huge credit goes to our lead producer, Chad Thompson, who just knew exactly how to pitch the project. He put it in the context of past list films and people who've been in other list films as well. And there are some big names too, as well as sort of in the context of Timothy Greenfield Vander's work. But I think what people have shared with us is that we were able to create an environment where people were really able to share more of themselves. How does that happen? I mean, I think part of it, step one, like at a very basic level, we had mostly API crew. I feel like as soon as they walked in, the message we're hoping to send was that this is a family space. This is a safe space, so to speak. This is a place where we can just talk about our bullshit, and we don't have to explain ourselves, because that was a real goal of our whole team. The A-list, where 15 Asian people explain how to eat this certain thing or explain why we do a thing. This was not about trying to be like cultural exchange. This was about real talk, and trying to talk about sort of like how we feel about this question of identity as if we were among ourselves. And so we wanted to get that across. Huge credit goes also to Jada Yuan, who was our lead interviewer as well. From that, Jada or I would do the interviews, and we just went into it. And I think the biggest compliment we've received, we just had a screening in San Francisco at CAMFest, which is Asian American Film Festival in San Francisco. And two of our interviewees, shared publicly that like these were some of the best interviews that they'd ever done, just through the research and through everything else. I mean, I think we like all were just feeling like, oh, wow, that's like surprising and sad, honestly, because I feel like we were just trying to have a conversation with them. We were just trying to be person to person with them and tell their stories in a way that wasn't extractive, that wasn't trying to get them to tell like their cute anecdote or, hey, do the thing, whatever.
Right.
Like that was really just trying to engage with them and connect with them. And in the context of, I guess, the conversations they'd had, we ended up being able to create a space where they felt open and safe enough to be able to say more. And so we're just forever grateful to all of them for sharing that with us.
There were so many moments. I can't even, I mean, I'm going to have to like geek out with you when we get together, but like so many moments.
We can go down the list. I'll just start naming them off. All right. We'll just start with Sandra. No, we don't have to do that.
No, well, I'm totally going to do this with you in person though. But I have to say, I know what it's like to be in the producer's seat. I personally have had moments, like even here with you, where I am learning as I'm going. And there are moments that I am connecting moments and experiences in my life. For you, when you're sitting here doing the interviews with these incredible people or in the edit, can you share a moment that was profound, something that you connected with, that you still sort of wrestle with now or have shifted in your perspective?
We almost would have to go down person by person, because I feel like each interview was profound in its own way. There are moments that like come to mind, like Sandra Oh, when we spoke with her, there's just such charisma and such performance that comes out of her. Like it was just like the joy to like sort of like be in the thrall of that. She introduced us to her glam squad, and she mentioned toward the end of the interview that like her glam squad noticeably is all AAPI.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And when she started her career, she said that was just not the case. That at least is an indication of what changed, at least. There are more of us, maybe more of us, who are getting into fields that are not like the traditional fields that people with immigrant backgrounds are necessarily drawn or forced
to
enter.
Just to recap, you definitely made that leap, from neuroscience to like filmmaking.
No, that was much to my parents' chagrin. But like, no, I mean, we had a jokey version of this where it's just like, what if it's all just like doctors and lawyers?
Yeah.
The list to make our parents happy.
We tried.
But I think the most profound thing for me really was to learn about all these other communities, even to learn about my own community, the one that I'm closest to, with Schuyler Bailar and him sharing his experience.
Oh my God, he's amazing.
He's amazing as a the trans-masc biracial Korean.
Schuyler really just broke so many barriers. And you know what? I'm just going to nerd out for just a second here too. Kudos to his family, because unfortunately homophobia is still very much an issue in any kind of family, certainly in the Asian community. And for him to have the strength to be authentically who he is, and his family just loving him. I was crying.
No, it's extraordinary, and it is a credit to his family. By way of context, Schuyler Bailar was born biologically female and was a competitive swimmer growing up, but came out as trans, and very famously came out as trans after they had already committed to join Harvard on the swim
Right.
team. And so the folks at Harvard worked with Schuyler to have him go from the girls team to the
Right.
boys team. And he's since become like this powerful advocate and activist. He's such an amazing speaker. Like I just saw him in San Francisco, and it's just like I need to take notes of like how to sound like you, because I'm just like, everything sounds like a complete thought when he speaks. He shared about seeing his experience, seeing gender from both sides and sort of standards of beauty from both sides, and how that's racialized was obviously like profound and deeply important to consider, I think, for all of us in terms of what we see in ourselves and what we've absorbed, how society sees us and holds us up to these standards of beauty. Every single person required just so much research, but also so much learning. For me, like there's no way that I could reach out to 15 different Asian and Pacific Islander communities and like know who is real. So much like credit goes to the folks that we are in community with who are able to help us, you know, who are able to talk to us about like, oh, this is a person in this community that would be great to talk to. I think it's that process that I feel most profoundly changed by, because what it felt like was embedding the act of building community into the process of making the film.
I agree.
I can sense like we're all process people, like, right? We're not like result people. Like the process is so important. What was really resonant to me was, again, God, I'm getting like really like nerdy. I'm sorry.
No,
like,
I'm like eating it all up. Are you kidding?
like the term Asian American itself, when it was created in 1968 by college students, among them Emmy and Eugene Yi at Berkeley, it was meant to replace the term Oriental, right? And it was supposed to be about a political project and about solidarity, because then they were thinking about the students of Chinese or Japanese or Filipino descent who are all working together to try to get ethnic studies happening, who are trying to be in solidarity with African American communities, with Chicano communities, what have you. You know, obviously when we think about Asian American stuff now, you know, we're just talking about like whatever, boba or like whatever, right?
Sriracha.
But like, yeah, sriracha. I feel like has obviously gotten lost is this idea of a shared identity, of this kind of solidarity. And I feel this has just sort of moved me to want to like even more to try and really explore and build all the ways that we can find these sources of commonality and these ways to be in community and solidarity with just the people under our umbrella, right? Just the people who are AACI, because that's already, like we said, like that's like half the world. But just also how that's a metaphor for like being American, full stop, being in the US, because we are, for better or for worse, this country with all this diversity in it. And, you know, we haven't really been like a multiracial democracy ever. Like maybe after 1965, it was like a little bit better, but like now it's obviously worse. And, you know, all we have is each other, and all we have is each other to try and build these ties and the solidarity with that we want to really get to that next step, to that liberatory step, to something where we don't, again, have to worry about looking like us, but we can just exist.
You and I started this conversation, and obviously we will continue this conversation through probably the rest of our lives together, and also as individuals, being hurt and having difficult experiences on varying levels. When you're going through this project and you're hearing other people in our community with similar stories and similar experiences, did going through that make the hurt deeper, resurrect the hurt, or have you found a way to take those more challenging experiences and feelings and convert it into something super empowering?
We spoke a bit about the making of the film, obviously, and just how we're trying to like embed community building into it. And because I mean, even just within our own communities, like race, gender, orientation, gender identity is an important one to mention too. Like these are all just, you know, aspects of ourselves that shape our humanity, but also sometimes make it hard to see each other's humanity. Part of the project of the film is really about hoping that it would inspire a similar kind of impulse for people who watch it. Because I think it's been interesting to see. I think some people, like, I know that like I've read something where like they kind of just didn't get it. It just sort of felt disparate. There was these 15 different voices and like it wasn't cohering into anything.
Wait, who said this?
this person was not from our communities. And I think that made sense because on a fundamental level, from conception, it wasn't really for people outside our communities. Like, it's for us. This is like taking out a smaller bag of piece of baggage out of the larger check-in bag.
Trunk.
Yeah. Yes. Every single time I connected with someone through the release of the film is a little bit of balm for my soul. My cup feels a little fuller because it makes it feel like our film is helping to build community. You've seen like the stuff I've worked on, like it's always been about that at its root. Can what we do build something that we feel like ourselves in? If this film can help to do that, then I feel like it gets me personally closer, and I hope it gets all of us closer. I'm reminded of this one reaction when we premiered. So we premiered a doc NYC last year in November, and there were a couple of hands that went up afterwards, and one of them was from, well, it was a young woman. She raised her hand, and she was just like, "Hi, so I'm Mongolian American," and I was just like, "Oh crap, we don't have it Mongolian in the film." But she proceeded to just share like how this film made her feel seen. It connects obviously with what you'd said before, but it was a reminder to me of the possibilities that do exist under this label. Our project and our idea was to question the need for it. I mean, it starts with this, like one of the first things you hear is like, I don't know why Asian Pacific American is a thing. You know, why is this a thing? Like, we're like so different. The other person who raised their hand was like an older Filipino nurse. We have a person who is a Filipino nurse in the film. And she was just like, I don't watch documentaries. Yours was pretty good. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll take that.
You know, that's big.
I know.
That's basically like a giant wet sloppy kiss to get that kind of sentiment from an Asian auntie.
Yeah. We're just really hoping that it has its time in community spaces, really just sort of like raising these conversations. Hopefully there's an A-list 2 or A-list 3, and other people can come in and give their perspectives, and we can build out, again, not a group portrait because it's impossible, but at least more of a sense of capacious with more voices, more stories, because there's so many stories in our communities.
Honestly, if one of your goals was to build a community within a community when you're making this film, I want to tell you first and foremost that you have.
Oh, it's really meaningful to hear.
You know, I think like you growing up, I had difficult experiences that impacted how I saw myself and sense of value or place. And only recently, literally recently, because ironically enough, I'm doing this podcast, and I never started this podcast thinking it would do anything for my own understanding of my background or heritage. But meeting other people in this industry and just beyond, like you as well, and having these conversations. I've had a bunch of actors like Osric Chow from Supernatural or Yvonne Chapman from Netflix's Avatar. It has actually given me such a greater sense of understanding of my own experiences, my self-perception, why I saw things the way I did. Now, back then, I didn't have the language for it. And now to have storytellers and filmmakers like yourself, Eugene, and, you know, my discovery and connection with you and, you know, Yvonne and Osric and all these other people, I feel like I found my home in some ways. I feel like I have a community that just gets me. And, you know, your former producing partner, Janet Yang, you know, for me, she was the only one that gave me the film, The Joy Luck Club. And then when she started talking about how, you know, growing up, she felt cringy to bring friends to her house. And when she shared that her family hung ducks and chickens in the house to dry, I almost fell over because I felt the exact same way. And to see someone like Janet Yang, this legendary like Hollywood producer, talk about something like almost, I felt like a little naked because my dad, who, by the way, till this day, hangs Chinese sausages like chandeliers from the house. and I was horrified.
Yeah.
So to your point, films like this and also films like your other films, like, Come Back to Me, The Rose, and
Retell Philly. Yeah.
films like that wouldn't have been possible. And now it's mind blowing to know that there's a Korean band selling out tickets in stadiums, and tickets cost $900 for the cheap seats. So it's so healing, and I thank you for that. But I guess my question to you is, making these films, you said it fills your cup, but has it healed some of that a little bit? And you still haven't answered the question of, have you been able to kind of figure out a way to convert this pain into something that is super empowering?
I mean, part of the reason, just speaking for myself, I do this work is to try and do some of that healing, to make that little boy inside me feel a little bit less lonely for all the reasons that we felt lonely growing up. This is something that, like, I think I talked about with regards to the film about the Korean rock band, the Road Come Back to Me, where this idea of healing is really kind of central to a lot of their music, and that film, for those of you who are listening who haven't seen it, engages with topics of mental health with what we hope is like enough candor for it to be a meaningful conversation. I remember speaking with one of the members who was really revealing a lot of what he'd gone through in terms of his mental health. How healing, like, it's not like a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. We'll still end up with a scar, or that scar might get torn open again. I mean, these aren't things that go away, but through the process and through the privilege of me being able to do this work, it's just meant so much to kind of hear about, like, what you're talking about right now, of how seeing you feel by these stories and how you connected with them. And it just makes me at least feel a little bit more like I'm not alone in all this, and that I'm not going crazy for feeling like this environment might be a hostile one for people who look like us. Like, growing up in this soil might have been difficult soil to put roots in, but through that process, that collective process of putting roots in this soil, it feels like I'm part of something. And that's why I do this. I want to feel like I'm part of something. It just takes a village, an army, whatever like metaphor you want, of people to come together and put their like talents and abilities and souls and time into something, to build something together. And what is more important than time, and the time that we can share together? And to be a part of that in the film communities that I've had the fortune to be a part of, and as well as just in the broader community that the films have gone out to, has just been like the absolute privilege of my life. What comes to mind is also the need to keep repeating some of our stories too, and keep telling our stories, because I mean, you talked about the animal products hanging in the window like chandeliers, and Janet is a bit older than us. There are younger generations too. And sometimes I think, do we still need to tell some of these same stories that like maybe we've heard like over and over? And yeah, the answer is definitively yes. And the specific example of the film is, what you can term the stinky lunchbox story, maybe.
Oh, yes.
There's great resonance, but for younger people, does that hit as much as it did for us? And that was among the things I learned through the process of making this film, that like, you don't need to overthink it. It does still matter to people to hear that, because that still is an experience that people go through. And the way that our participant Vang, who's the chef who tells that story of when he was a child, by way of context, he's a James Beard finalist, Hmong American chef whose cuisine really channeled his family and his cultural heritage. But he tells his stinky lunchbox story, and the way that he tells it and the way that people have responded to it is really just something that like gets me each time, because that shit just matters still. And these are like foundational stories for our communities that just need to be told and retold every generation again and again, because they just tell us a little bit more about who we are.
I don't think I could have had a filmmaker like you growing up. Going back to the main point that you made, and maybe this is, maybe something Janet said, the work she's doing is about healing childhood traumas. I think you and I innately get that. I didn't realize that this podcast was a part of that. That's a whole nother conversation. But I'm hoping that I'm doing that in some ways, or my part of it.
Oh, you are. You absolutely are.
Thank you. But you have created a community through your filmmaking, just, getting an AAPI crew, which, by the way, in my 27-year career, I've only had one time that I've had a predominantly Asian crew. And I can't tell you how unbelievably powerful and incredible that felt. I really think your work is important. And The A-List is really an incredible film for all AAPI, but also for the people that are not in our community. Watch it and get a better understanding of who we are.
I'm reminded of something that Kathy Masaoka, who is an elder who spoke about her experience being activist on behalf of reparations from the Japanese American concentration camp experience. She was asked the question at one of the Q&As about a lot of what we've been talking about. How did she get so comfortable sharing kind of her experiences? What she shared was that when she was talking to us, she felt like she didn't need to represent anyone but herself. I think to be on your pod and to be talking about representation, but to put it in those terms is really just what I hope people can kind of understand the importance of, because so often we're asked to represent more than ourselves. And I certainly, can only try to represent myself accurately. I don't think I could presume to represent anybody else or anything else, but the hope is that by doing that authentically, by being ourselves authentically, we can give permission and space for folks to do that themselves. It really is kind of the conversation, the space between us where all the work is happening.
I'd love to keep you forever, Eugene, but I'm going to respect your time and ask you to sign us off. But because this is your second appearance, I'm going to ask you, Eugene, let me know who you are and what you encourage others to represent.
My name is Eugene Yi. I am just a voice among many, as we all are. And I would just encourage folks to represent nothing but themselves, their true, authentic, full selves in the best way they can. And if they can't, find a place where you feel like you can do a little bit more of that representing of yourself.
I just want to say thank you to Eugene Yi for coming back on the show and for sharing his story with such honesty and vulnerability. And also, Eugene, thank you for the work you're doing as a filmmaker, creating stories that don't just inform, but really invite all of us to reflect, connect, and feel a little less alone. This conversation with Eugene really stayed with me because it's a reminder that so much of what we're all trying to figure out, belonging, identity, being authentic, it isn't separate from us. It is us. And I think the more honest we are about it, the more space we can create for other people to feel seen, too. If this episode resonated with you, I hope you carry this into your day. You don't have to perform to be worthy of connection, and you don't have to become someone else to be accepted. The A-List is now streaming on HBO. The film isn't just a story about representation. It's a story about all of us just trying to find our place in the world. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, subscribe, and download. You can follow along on Instagram at Reppin_podcast. Catch clips on YouTube. That handle is Reppin Podcast. And listen wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch this conversation exclusively on Spotify. Thank you always for listening and for your support. In a world where we're all trying to be something or someone, just know that on Reppin, we're human first. Reppin is a Suburban Outlaw Productions. Until next time, stand up and represent.
Rough and rugged. Represent NY, hold it down for my peeps, New York, New York.